Okay, it didn't kick me out. That's good. All right, awesome. So, I'll do the introduction later on. It's called the Libyan Quest. It's a podcast about education, learning. It'll probably branch out because I like doing a lot of things. But today we have Jade. So, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jade. I'm an ESL tutor, which means I teach English as a second language. I have worked with adults from Poland, Ukraine, Taiwan, and even Spain on things like conversation, grammar, and even business English skills.
Nice, nice. And I have questions about the business English skills as well. That's quite interesting. Um, so, how long have you been teaching? Can you hear me?
Well, I started teaching, yes, yeah. I started teaching for the ACT and the SAT, which are college entry exams here in the US. I started teaching that almost 4 years ago. And then last year I started getting into English as a second language. I really love being able to help people from other cultures learn the language. I grew up learning a little bit of Spanish, so I like learning languages too. And it's been an amazing journey so far. I've met all kinds of people, and I've developed my skills, my niche, and my own content, which is really fun.
That's quite nice. You mentioned that you do the college entry exams preparation. What was that? I think a lot of people would be interested in knowing how to get into university in the US. So can you please tell us more about that?
Sure. So the ACT and the SAT are two very common college entry exams in the US. Many take the ACT, and that's what I've mostly had. The SAT is a little harder, a little more advanced, and has recently gone digital. So people have been taking what we call the DSAT or the digital SAT to learn how or to practice the skills necessary to get into colleges like Harvard and Yale or even local colleges. Basically, what you need to know for the exams relates to reading, writing, math, and science. If you know those skills really well, if you know grammar, if you know algebra, geometry, um, it's a combination of really what students would have learned throughout their time in high school to gauge how much they remembered and if they're prepared for what college was going to bring and the challenges that they'll encounter in college.
Um, are you familiar with IGCSEs?
I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with what is on it. It's a test, correct?
Yes,
Or just the
it's
type
a, it's
of.
a it's a type of curriculum that
And us,
that's,
your camera's really freezing on me. It's not been very good.
I have no idea why, but don't worry. Like the recording is gonna take it from my side, and it's gonna take yours from your side, so it's not gonna be an issue.
Okay.
As long as you can see me, that's gonna be fine. Uh, the IGCSEs is the British system or British counterpart for SATs. If you know what IELTS is, the TOEFL is the American counterpart for it. So you have SATs or ACTs, and then the Brits have IGCSEs. I was interested in asking you about the differences because we've had IGCSEs in Libya for quite a while, but now we're witnessing the introduction of SATs. So I thought maybe you could talk about briefly talk about the differences, but since you haven't done IGCSEs before, you can just skip that.
I haven't taught any college entry exams outside of the US. I wouldn't be able to know the subtle differences, unfortunately. But as I was saying, if you've had an education in English and math and science and reading, and you feel like your knowledge of English in those subjects is really strong, then you may have a good chance of being able to get into a college there. There might be a different exam for non-native speakers. I'm not sure, but it's really more for students that have been through, school and through high school that are looking to get into college.
So let me get this straight. Anybody can take the SATs. It doesn't matter what kind of high school they've been to or they've studied in. Is that correct?
Well, to be honest, I'm not really sure. All of the students that I've had have been high school students. I really haven't seen that. I've seen people that have wanted to complete their, high school diploma and they end up getting a GED, which is a little different. Um, but I'm not really sure actually. I'd have to look into that. To me, in my mind, you need to pass the IELTS or the TOEIC, which would be for being able to show your English proficiency. But I don't know if that would be applicable.
Okay.
Haven't had any students in that area.
Okay. My thought process was a student who has studied in Libya, for example, does the type of school they've been in matter when they go to the States and they go to a university over there? Uh, but I guess it's SATs that would count if we have that certification already. So yeah, this is digital. That must be a lot easier uh, to do. But all right, let's talk about English. Can you share your journey into teaching English and what sparked your creativity and lesson planning? Um, what makes you creative when planning lessons?
Thank you. Yeah, so I had gotten a bachelor's degree in English from a local college called Middle Tennessee State University. I really didn't know what I was going to do with it. I loved writing, but it was very hard to become an author. So I ended up applying for a job at a local center called the Huntington Learning Center, where that's where I teach ACT and SAT skills. And it showed really what I was capable of. And I ended up looking last year for English as a second language jobs as another source of income and discovering that there was a lot of opportunities online and lots of jobs. And I grew in my knowledge of it. I got TEFL certified. And then in the last year, I started making my own content and seeing what I could come up with. And I've done lessons from everything from, I've done pronunciation lessons. I've done lessons on, I did a lesson on deep learning. I did a lesson on, I've done English for marketing. I've done like logos and slogans and call to actions. And I've even done a lesson on like FOMO. So I have all kinds of different topics that I've created to appeal to different types of students.
Okay, this sounds interesting. Um, what kind of content have you tried making? Like we, as English teachers, we all know that there's face to face, there's New English File, there's New Headway. Uh, how do you branch out of these known curriculums that we use?
Sure. Well, to be honest, I just started creating my own PowerPoints. I think I've seen maybe some things that I didn't really like, and maybe some of the curriculum I had were just really, I think it just came from me wanting to see what I could do and having an idea and putting it on a presentation and then figuring out, oh, I can add this and I can do this and I can create an entire idea out of that. Um, I ended up learning about Creative Commons, so I didn't take away from anybody who was, creating content and making sure that I was doing it ethically as well. So it's been a process of understanding what I'm missing and what I want to teach and what I think will be helpful and compiling it in a very clear, engaging package. I've come up with games from the website Genially. I've, I've come up with different images and I just had fun making sure that I made lessons that brought the child out in the adults that I teach.
Nice. Do you prefer teaching adults or children?
Adults. I
Okay.
I don't teach little children. I teach high schoolers. but I've taught children and I didn't enjoy it.
It is quite difficult to it's quite a battle between what you want to teach, information that you want to teach them, English you want to teach them, but also behavior as well, because you're not only teaching them the language, you teach them how to behave as people, as adults, basically. You and I are all the adults, so we have this common, unwritten rule or unwritten rules that okay, we should behave this way, that we were raised upon, but children don't. They're still new to this world, so you need to, yeah. So I totally agree. It is a whole different world. You talked about pronunciation. How do you approach pronunciation, and what are some common challenges your students face?
Sure. So I created a course around every single letter of the alphabet. Some adults don't even remember all the letters of the alphabet. So we go back to that when we start. I ask them how they sound. I teach them long and short sounds. And then we go over different word pairs that make different sounds in sentences. For example, August, AU, is aw.
Oh,
But you can also get the, aw sound in paw, AW, paw. So there are different letters that go together that make different versions of a word. So I'm trying to think of some of the examples I have. Um, you know, Giraffe is GI, but it sounds like a J.
hmm.
All kinds of different words have different sounds, and sometimes you add a letter or you take it away, and you create a different sound. So
Hmm.
I try to give that practice to my students to show all the subtle variations of what kind of words can be created. I expand their vocabulary with different practice. I create games for them to show, okay, I know what this pronunciation sounds like because I've had this practice. I've seen that kind of pair before. Um, so it's a way to create a broader sense of what these sound like and breaking down the words better. The challenges that I've had are, I think, for the students, some different cultures struggle with different sounds. So whether it be forgetting to put the H in front of a word, or swapping the W with a V, or vice versa. It's making sure that I can get the student to understand some of the pronunciation errors that they struggle with, making them aware of it, and then getting them the practice so that that is no longer a challenge for them. Of course, and then helping them remember all the different sounds because there's so many of them that it can be overwhelming.
It can definitely. But one more thing about pronunciation is that, okay, you have a student. I've had this teaching Arabic to English learners, sorry, English speakers, because some sounds are a bit difficult. Sometimes you don't have in English or Spanish or any other Latin language. Uh, they, if you have a student, for example, that cannot make that sound that you need them to make, how do you go about that? Okay, so let's go through this process. So you've taught them a word or a sentence, you gave them the pronunciation, but they're still struggling at some part or point of it. Let's not go through the whole sentence or the whole word, but they struggle with a certain
Sure.
sound. What is your thought process? Or what do you do when you face that problem? And do you
Well,
see it
I
as a
would check
problem?
to see
Sorry.
like the
Yeah, sorry.
different levels of it. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Do you see it?
Yeah,
Do you see
I
it
mean,
as a
I do.
problem?
I think
And
there's a
how do you
difference
answer?
between pronunciation and accent. And, I try to work on the pronunciation of words without them losing their quintessential accent, what makes them uniquely Italian or Spanish or Polish. So for me, what I'll do is I'll do a few things. I'll write another word that might be easier. I will give the pronunciation sounds like, if it's happy, I'll do HAH, PEEP, so that they can see the actual sounds they need to make. and I'll also touch my throat and show them how I kind of sound it out. Ha, 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 b, b. So getting that sense of learning how it feels in the throat is important to understanding how it comes out of the throat.
Okay. And have you had that challenge before? And okay, so there are two ways, obviously, when you have that challenge. Like they either make it or they don't. Now, you obviously had students who have made it. What do you do with the ones that don't? How do you approach that? Do you keep trying
I'm
or
sorry,
keep
I didn't quite get
practicing?
that question. What was that?
Okay, so obviously there are two ways that could result in. There are students who make it, and there are students who don't. So obviously, as an English teacher, for this long, you've had students who have made it. What do you do with the ones that don't? Like they can't make the sound. They're still stuck on it. You practice it over and over
Yes,
again.
stuck on that.
What I usually okay, I'll share what I
Well,
usually do. I have WhatsApp, so I usually have my students' WhatsApp. And because right now we're connected in a live call, sometimes the sounds that we make might not get there. Like just a few minutes ago, you didn't hear what I said. So I just send it as a voice message, which is crystal clear, and they can practice it. What is, how do you approach this personally?
I'll usually look it up on Google to show them the sound on Google because, sometimes they may not feel like maybe I'm doing it enough or they're still not hearing it through my voice. So I'll do the Google version so they can really see, okay, this is the most accurate version. I get it now. Um, so that's usually what I'll do. I'll encourage them and say, you're getting close. You're not quite there. Keep going. We're going to practice that. Just keep practicing it. Because sometimes they just won't get it and they're not quite there by the end of it. But you still say, listen, you're getting there. You're getting close. And then, practice that. And you just tell them to practice it. So it's a combination of things depending on if they get it with one prompt or if they need multiple prompts because they're just not hearing it and they're not able to really get that sound out. But I usually try to also really push it. So if it's an H and not saying the H, really, really get that. Or I'll give them like if they're trying to get the sound, I'll be like, think of a pirate. You think of different characters or mascots or anything that is relatable to most people to give them a better sense of what they need to do to get that sound.
That's like quite a nice way to go at it. Usually, the good thing about Arabic is that there are actually diagrams to show you how to make the sound within the neck and the throat and the palate, and it's actually very visual. You can see it. I was like, the tongue moves back. All right, the tongue. So it's actually quite interesting. Language learning is quite the interesting thing to do, to be honest. But this brings us back to something else. How do you incorporate encouragement and positive reinforcement in your teaching method? How do you make sure, obviously it's not your responsibility as a teacher, but how do you make sure that your learner, especially young learners, you've taught high schoolers, how do you make sure they're motivated to keep trying? Because some things are difficult, especially for second language learners. So, how do you do that?
Yeah. So you're saying that's not my responsibility, but it is. You are a cheerleader as much as you are a teacher, a therapist, a cheerleader. I mean, you're all of these different roles. And sometimes, because I love to create games, I'm even a game master. So there's all kinds of different roles you take on when teaching anyone, young or old. So how do I encourage people? Well, what I like to do is literally just, okay, you got this. You're close. We're getting there. We're getting there. And just kind of make sure that they are aware that they're they're on the right track. Um, I also try to stay away. Sometimes I've done this, but I try to stay away from no. No is a very, I think, invalidating word when you're learning. So I do try to stay away from. Sometimes if the student is really far away from, like, no, it's not right. But I do try to get back to you're trying, or you're close, or not quite. Not quite is better than no in my eyes, because it's basically saying maybe you're on the right track, you're not quite there yet. So I try to stay from no when possible, because that's really very definitive and sometimes demoralizing depending on the context. Also, one thing I do in groups, because I find groups to be very, they of course they come with their own challenges. One of the things that I've noticed is helpful for students that are not on a higher level, like other students in the group. Um, I try to ask them, "Hey, can anyone else help her with this one? Anybody got any ideas?" So that way they can play a part in guiding this person as well and create a more collective unit. Um, with students that struggle more, it's more of just, listen, you're doing great. I know it's tough. I know it's tough, and we're gonna get there. You got this. It's just it's a palette of different phrases, gestures, um, facial movements, and choosing what I call intentional authenticity. Choosing to be authentic for that student, give them what they need in that moment to make them feel, I can do this. Instead of just saying those words, truly trying to feel what they must be going through to give them that authentic meaning behind the words you give them. That's what I feel is important.
A lot. Thank you. That was a very good, insightful insight. A lot of what you're saying resonates with what we've done in CELTA and PCELT. So you've done your TEFL certification. Now, when did you do your TEFL certification? Like, when did you finish that? Uh, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's not been great this whole time. You've broken up a lot, and usually it comes
Uh,
back, and I hear the rest of your question. But
oh,
it's been
okay.
very difficult to
Yeah,
communicate because it's been off the whole time.
yeah. I don't know why the connection keeps coming and going, but that's what I like about this app. It's just it records it from my side and it records it from your side, so it makes sure that everything is in sync. My question is, a lot of what you're saying resonates with what we've done in CELTA and PCELT. So when did you do your TEFL certification? I have a question related to that.
Last year, I got a 300-hour TEFL certification from
Good.
Premier to EFL.
So, do you think your teaching method and style has changed prior and post getting the certification or the training, let's say?
So I think for me, I needed a grounds in what ESL was, how it could be taught, um, you know, the kind of challenges that were involved. I think really the best thing that a lot of companies can do is help you identify who you are and what you bring. And that's what I think anything with any of these things are, is having a foundation allow me to one day figure out, what am I doing? How am I doing it? Why am I doing it? How can I improve it? And to make it the version that I want to see and that I would want if I was my own student. So that's really what it is. Everything that I've learned, yeah, I've learned new things that can be helpful, but a lot of it is making clearer what's already there.
I think that's the beauty of any TEFL certification. It shows you that, you know what, you've been teaching, but now you're more of a facilitator. You should learn yourself and make it into a learning community instead of having the role of a teacher. Like, okay, I'm a teacher. you learn. No, we're all learning. And that's
Yeah.
I've been teaching children for the past 5 years now. No, no, since 2017. So it's about okay, that's a lot. About 7 years now, and that's a switch I've made from teaching adults. And each classroom and each student is a whole TEFL sort of, training, because each of them has their own um, desires. Being children,
Yeah.
of course, they don't want to come and study. They just want to finish it. Let's just want to go home and play, or just don't want to play. So it is quite a challenge, but it's been quite interesting. And I agree with you. Teaching adults is much easier. But being the person that I am, I like challenges most of the time. Uh, on top of the normal challenge, like teaching English itself is a challenge, but add that children. So you're not just a teacher. Even what you said it yourself. I did take the role or responsibility that okay, motivation and encouragement is my responsibility. But I got to the point where it's not your responsibility anymore. You can't do that anymore, especially for children, especially for adults. If they're not motivated, they're not going to do it. That's how I
Yeah.
see it. So
Exactly.
yeah. Okay, I still have two more questions. One of them is, so you switched from
Great.
teaching SATs and SATs to ESL, correct?
No, I do both currently.
No, yeah, currently you do both, but in the past you only did SATs and SATs and ACT, and then you moved to ESL, correct?
Yes, yes, and then I included ESLs to have them to do both.
How is it different teaching SATs to ESL? How are these two different?
It's the level kind of the language involved. So people that are learning ESL are usually wanting conversation skills, some general, some grammar to understand how sentences are formed. Whereas for the ACT and the SAT, you're having to learn punctuation. You're having to learn like the different types of like what's a collective noun, what's a collective adjective, terms that really do not come up in typical ESL classes, um, because they're more focused on the foundations of sentences and words and speaking than they are on more complex English categories like redundancy and ambiguity and wordiness, which come from really knowing the language and moving from foundational understanding to artistic understanding. So that's at least in the English part. In the reading part, the reading texts are much more challenging, and you're having to understand how to draw conclusions, how to generate main ideas, and how to find details on a higher level. So basically, it would require somebody that has a deep understanding of not just how English is and how it functions, but how it comes together to make something really artistic and cohesive and concise. And when you understand that, you'll do a better job on the verbal sections of the ACT and SAT.
All right. That's actually changes my opinion because in international schools in Libya, what we do is we focus on these things, collective nouns and punctuation and things like that. But the level of the students themselves is not up to that level. So you're talking about A1, A2 level students that you're introducing collective nouns, introducing adjectives,
Yeah.
strong adjectives, weak adjectives, and from what I'm getting from you right now is that these things are important if you're planning on taking an SAT or ACT exam, ACT exam. So they are in a way preparing them for that from a young age. So there are some ups and downs to it that would require further thought. But now I understand the existence or the reasons for the presence of these things in the curriculum. Okay, so
Yeah, so honestly, a lot of the students, I was just going to add, a lot of the
yeah,
students that I have even struggle with things like that. Voice, they struggle with these things, and these are not native level speakers. So I can't even imagine, lower level speakers trying to understand these more complex concepts. It's a again, it depends. It depends on the student. It depends on how open they are to learning, how eager and receptive they are to new ideas. Some students, it may just click, and then others, it may not. But there are just certain concepts that I feel are maybe for a higher level student that really understands not just what a sentence is and how it functions, but why it needs to be better and sound more eloquent.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. There are in my opinion, they definitely need ESL training, or at least alongside the curriculum, so to make sure that they actually go uh, on par. At least they don't have to be on the same level, but at least A2, and then they go to B1 instead of staying at A2 and going to high school, just studying what a collective noun is, what a strong adjective is, what is that, what is this. So it is quite, it seems like a hard disk to me that it is a CPU. But yeah, that's how it is in Libya for now. Okay,
Wow.
so the next question is about gamification. Now, gamification is becoming popular in education, but how do you use it to enhance learning? What kind of games have you tried that you've made?
Yeah. I love it. Personally, I'm a big fan of it because this goes back to me loving learning on my computer when I used to play computer games that were educational. So I totally get making gaming a part of education. Of course, it's in the way you do it, but I think it can be fun. I think it can add a level of excitement, but also, maybe retention that comes from learning in a way that's more conducive to having fun. So I've created games. I've created a lot of pronunciation games where I have a word and I have the student choose which of the sounds do those letters make together. Um, I used to like spin a wheel. I did some of that before. I would have put something on a wheel and ask a question. Trying to think. I like to create games on Genie. I also, for my ACT students, I created a whole like comprehensive test, which asked them a lot of things that we learned in our curriculum, that I sometimes will give to the student as a like if it's our last session, I'll kind of do that so that they can see what they remembered from our time together. So yeah, I love to create games. I just want to be sure that I'm doing it in the best way possible, and I think we're still on the journey of creating games and gamifying education that goes beyond this is fun. I'm competing against somebody else. I'm getting a reward. To I'm learning in the best way possible, and I'm enjoying doing it. We're still working on that.
It would work for adults as well. Like if for children, you can multiply that by 10, but with adults, that would work wonders. They're not thinking about learning anymore. They're doing this like you and I. We're not thinking about language learning at the moment. We're just using it. So this is what the goal, I guess, to get to this point of just using the language without even thinking about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a perfectionist, so I always focus on what I say, whether it's grammatically and whether it's correct or not. I'm like, that was incorrect, that was incorrect, and then I beat myself up. I beat myself up about it at the minute, like at the moment, but then I forget about it, which is counterintuitive. I should remember, but I don't. Uh,
Yeah, I find that adults, we think we don't want those things anymore because we're older, but I find that the adults just love the games and interacting with it. They find it fun, and I think we're all looking to find that inner child in ourselves, and so that's what I like to bring out in adults, and that's what I like to bring out in myself because that's to me when we can really connect is through the playful side of ourselves.
yes, yes. The concept of inner child has never I've never even I've heard about it, but I've never actually experienced it until like a few months ago, and like oh, no, a year ago. So I was like, you know what, this inner child needs to play. So let's like learn though, but
That's
you need to
it.
teach you discipline as well.
That's it.
So it is quite
Of
fun
course.
to yeah. So being a teacher is quite the thing to be honest, because it shows you more to you than to the students. You're learning more than the students are.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jay. This has been an honor. Like your spirit and your the way you present things and answer questions has been like now I wish I was a student. I want to learn. Can you teach Spanish? I, wa- I, wa-
I'm learning it myself, so maybe one day.
like English, okay, I can't. English, okay, maybe I'll learn English at some point. Like you know, I need an English teacher. I'll come to
Oh,
you.
okay.
Like I'm at the process of learning German. I learned German
Cool.
for 6 months, and I was able to reach conversational level in 4 months. Sorry, and it's still an ongoing process. I'm still between B1 and B2, but it's quite
Nice.
nice. I did it to see what challenges my students face. Like, okay, why aren't they learning? How hard can it be? And now it's hard. It's not hard, but it just takes
Wow.
time. Yeah, just
Yeah,
that's all.
that's actually a really good point. I realize from learning Spanish, I remind my students of that. Listen, I'm learning Spanish. I know how difficult it is to learn. It's intimidating. It's frustrating. It's overwhelming, and that's what I let them know, that I am as much of a student in what I'm doing as they are. I'm learning along with them, and that's what
Yes.
helps also connect me to them and their experience.
I think changing the meaning of the word difficult and frustrated and incorporating it as there's much pleasure as there are pain. We need both because if you're sick, you need pain. If you're not sick, you're having fun, you need pleasure. So having pain does not mean something negative, as in, you know what, give up. No, this is how things are like. Difficulty is a part of learning. It's not something that tells you that okay, you're not good enough. No, we are all good enough. We
Yeah.
just need to spend time doing something.
Exactly. Yeah, I let my students know, listen, I mean, if they say it's difficult, that's okay. That's part of the process. You're doing it. Oh, I didn't know that. That's why you're here to learn. So awesome. You always find a way to spin it to show them this was actually why you came. Don't forget that. So
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much, Shade.